You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, happy Friday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. It's the end of another week. Welcome to my program. It's the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. You can also hear archives over at iTunes and iHeartRadio. And go over to Odyssey Radio at odysy1.com, and you can see all the different places where this show plays in its audio format. Now you can join the simulcast in video right now over at my YouTube channel. You can also find about 230 archived episodes of this program right there on my YouTube page. And that's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Come on over right now, as a matter of fact, and join the live chat room with the other fellow Intrepids, and find a good family of people over there. Have some good conversation, a rollicking good time in the chat room. So again, like I said, happy Friday. I hope your week was good, and hopefully for you it's over and you've got a nice weekend laid out ahead of you. If nothing else, just to relax and kick back. And if you are, by the way, still out of work, if your company has not reopened due to pandemic setbacks, I hope that your week was still a good one, still eventful, that you're finding ways to keep your nose above the water, and hopefully getting in better shape than bad shape. Sitting and eating, Cheese Whiz on crackers while binge watching Adventure Man or Survivor Man or something like that. So thanks for being here. Thanks for taking your time to choose this show as something you want to do an hour every day, or at least an hour tonight. And if you have not joined already, join my YouTube channel. Subscribe, click on the little bell icon. You'll get notifications every day. This show airs every night of the week, Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. out east, 7 p.m. West Coast time, and 8 p.m. in the Mountain Time. We always forget Mountain Time. They're in the middle. So thanks for being here. Before we get going, I've been spending, I'm at the end of our third week talking about Native America. It might even be the fourth week. So we've been in this the better part of a month. And this could be really an elective college course. There is so much to cover. Even the events and the details we've talked about, there's so much more detail to all of those. And this is a Native American view of the conquering of the American West. Now, before I get started, I had some brief conversations with people in social media and in other areas. My neighbors last night, we were talking about this. How our country, our flag, hanging there draped on the wall behind me, you can see that if you're watching the video, how our flag represents this nation, represents the goodness of this nation. Has it flown over atrocities? Yeah. Has it flown over the bad spots in our history? Yes, it has. Are we a perfect nation? No. But we are a nation that exists of the people, by the people, for the people. Now, we are also a nation of laws and a nation that is a constitutionally limited representative republic. We have representatives that we elect to office to represent us in the federal government and in local governments. That does not mean that they do not sometimes make bad decisions on our behalf and on the behalf of our country. We've been going through protests. It gets tiresome to see it because the protests have become anarchist riots, and every little thing, the counterculture, has popped up in all of this. Let's get rid of anything that is a symbol of what we once were, because we were bad people. Well, you know what? If we changed it all today, 30 years from now, somebody else is going to rise up and say, we're a bad country in this new stuff. Let's change it. So what we have to do, it's like our families, it's like our spouses, it's like our children. Sometimes we, in a relationship, we have bad moments. Should that gauge who we are? No, not for the rest of time. How you overcome your obstacles, how you overcome your mistakes, your wrongdoings, your bad deeds. Remember, nation building and nation maintaining is not the same as having a relationship with another person, where you may go through your ups and downs. There may be infidelities, there may be atrocities committed within that. Sometimes there are calls to end those relationships. I get that on a personal level, a one-to-one level. But when you're talking a nation, there are the growing pains of becoming a nation. And when we were founded in the 18th century, there were certain paradigms in place that we realized, and our founders, being geniuses, realized right away how inconsistent their lives were with the idealistic words that they had written. All men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so we broke the bonds with the tyrannical government that was not representing us and started a new nation. Now, if there are people today, anarchists who are spray painting on buildings, bombing buildings, lighting cities on fire, things like that, that is not the way to go about. That's not rebellion, that is anarchy. So there are ways to go about that. I'm not here to give a lesson on civics on how to do that. Most of us know already innately that that is not the way you achieve change and better change. That is the way. It's like the old song, we don't get fooled again. I tip my hat to the new Constitution. The beards, they all grew longer overnight, and we don't get fooled again. Here's the new boss, just the same as the old boss. Whenever you have human beings who are running the show, you're going to have problems. They may not appear right away, but they appear down the road, and you're going to have somebody else that's going to want to change it into something completely different. So I stand... The question I got from a dear friend of mine, she asked, in general, there's a lot of people saying they want to leave this country. Where would you live if you left the country? And I said, I've always been partial. And she said that she had European relatives who were very concerned about her living in America. And she said, where would you move to if you left America? She asked in general. And I said, I love my country, but there are times I'd love nothing better than to pull up into a few acres on an island off the west coast of Scotland and raise sheep and horses and go to the local pub every night and not worry. But, pretty soon, problems reach everywhere. And I said, having said all of that, I said, I still love my country. We may have our atrocities we've gone through, our black spots, our bad deeds. I said, but sometimes some of the bad deeds were done to make the world a better place. Do you think your country lies to you, lies to its good people, in order to do good things around the world? Yes, sometimes we have to. As my old friend John Ward used to say, he said, sometimes secrets are necessary. The people, while this government is of the people, by the people, for the people, we put people in place representing us that sometimes need to keep secrets from us in order to accomplish a better end. So that has happened. I'm not here tonight to go through a bullet point list of all the things where we've done things and meddled where we shouldn't have. This whole series on Native America has been an effort to uncover what seems to be the hidden history out there of how we became an empiric continent from sea to shining sea. We had to do it by subjugating, dehumanizing, demonizing, and eliminating the people who were already here. we struggled with that. And it wasn't until after we did it, it seems, that people in the United States woke up and said, hey, that's wrong. And so what do you do about it now, 150 years later, 120 years later since the Wounded Knee Massacre, which took place in 1890, which was considered to be almost the last act of violence and massacre against the Native American peoples. It kind of sealed the lid. And what do you do now, nowadays? Well, we're a century out. Some of those reservations still exist. All of the treaties have been broken. All of the treaties have been rewritten, but they still exist. We honor the treaties. We keep our word. I don't care if the most spectacular, let's take Vril is discovered underneath Native American land in the United States wants it. Vril, by the way, is a fictional power source written in the 1870s by Bulwer Lytton in his first science fiction book. And let's say that something like that's discovered. It's not the United States'. That's a bad way to say it. It doesn't belong to the United States. It belongs to the tribe under which it sits. So just using that as a weird example, but to say today we need to keep honoring our word. We are a nation that was built sometimes on bad things, sometimes on atrocity, but we still exist as the last best hope in the world for freedom. Yeah, some people will come and say, well, look at these great socialist countries, the Scandinavian countries and so on. That's fine. You know, they have their system that works for them. This is who we are. We are no longer European. My ancestors, as I've said a couple of times before, came over here 300 years ago from Wales. They were European. But at the same time, I'm not European. I'm descended from European immigrants. But I'm thoroughly American. I am Native American. If 3 centuries doesn't establish the fact that I was born a Native American, nothing will. Now, I'm not indigenous by the label put on Native Americans, talking about Indian tribes. But I am native to this land, and it's my country. So all of that to say, the things we talk about are the real history, or at least the opposite perspective of the history that we had in the establishing of this country during the 19th century. Do we still commit atrocities? Do we still do bad things? Yeah, but I think we are evolving as a nation. That doesn't mean we evolve into a different kind of nation. It means that we evolve into a better version of what we were founded to be. And if anything comes along that wants to deny you your rights, your amendment rights, First Amendment, Second, Third, Fourth, all the way down the line, your constitutional rights, if anything comes along and says we need to change and abolish this and abolish, then it's not right. We can enhance those things. We do not abolish them. These are what make us who we are. I saw a little thing, and it's very idealistic, perhaps tugs on emotional strings, and there's going to be people who would hear this or read it or listen to it that would disagree with it. But it's called Old Glory, and it's written about the American flag. If you have not heard this, I posted it on my social media this morning. And if you didn't get a chance to see it, go on over to my Facebook page and you'll see a video of this being done. But I'm going to read the text to you this morning. So everything I've said is kind of a preamble leading up to what I want to say, what I wanted to read here with this. And I want you to think back to a time when we honored our country, despite knowing we had our shortcomings and we had our atrocities. Bring that back to the present. That even though we are an imperfect country, we are an amazing country. I said to my friend in her post this morning, I said, having said that, I'd love to live on a little island off the coast of Scotland. I said I would never give up my country. I love my country. And despite its blotches, its bad marks, its stitches, it's one of the most amazing, phenomenal, light on a shining hill places to live in the world. And that's why people are dying to get here. And they can't understand why we have people who live here, that were born here, who want to see its eradication. I want to read you this. That flag hanging on the wall behind me that I have draped artistically on the wall, wrapping around swords and the rolled up Constitution and things like that, as kind of a backdrop for this radio show. I want to read this to you. I heard this morning, and it brought tears to my eyes. Maybe it will while I read it. I apologize in advance if it does that. I'm not trying to be hyper-emotional here, but I want you to hear this, because I think that this is an important thing for us to remember. So I want you to think about this as I read it. This is called Old Glory. I don't know who wrote this. I've seen it in many different places. And it's talking about our flag. So focus on that for a minute. Those of you in the chat room, whatever you're talking about right now over there, cars, working on cars, family issues, health issues, so on and so forth. Listen, stop everything and listen to this. Listen to this and respond to it. I am the flag of the United States of America. My name is Old Glory. I fly atop the world's tallest buildings. I stand watch in America's halls of justice. I stand guard majestically over great institutions of learning. I stand guard with the greatest military power in the world. Look up and see me. I stand for peace, honor, truth, and justice. I stand for freedom. I am confident. I am arrogant. I am proud. When I'm flown with my fellow banners, my head is a little higher, my colors a little truer. I bow to no one. I am recognized all over the world. I am worshipped. I am loved and I am feared. I have fought in every battle of every war for more than 200 years. Gettysburg, Shiloh, Appomattox, San Juan Hill, the trenches of France, the Argonne Forest, Anzio, Rome, the beaches of Normandy. Guam, Okinawa, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, in the Persian Gulf, and a score of places long forgotten by all but those who were there with me. I was there. I led my soldiers, my sailors, my airmen, my Marines. I followed them and watched over them. They loved me. I was on a small hill in Iwo Jima. I was dirty, battle-worn, and tired, but my Marines and sailors cheered me, and I was proud. I've been soiled, burned, torn, and trampled on the streets of countries that I have helped set free. It does not hurt, for I have been soiled, burned, torn, and trampled on the streets of my own country. And when it's by those I have served in battle, it hurts. But I shall overcome, for I am strong. I have slipped the surly bonds of earth, and from my vantage point on the moon, I stand watch over the new uncharted frontiers of space. I have been silent witness to all of America's finest hours and all of her darkest moments. But my finest hour comes when I'm torn in strips to be used as bandages for my wounded comrades on the field of battle, when I fly at half-mast to honor my soldiers, my airmen, my sailors, my Marines, and when I lie in the trembling arms of a grieving mother at the graveside of her fallen son or daughter. I was there when the firefighters and first responders came to the Twin Towers that were blown apart by cowards. I stood tall, and I marked the spot where those atrocities were perpetrated against us. I am proud. I am bright. I give proof through the night that in the twilight's last gleaming, our flag is still there. I am proud. My name is Old Glory. Long may I wave, dear God, long may I wave. So, I don't know what you think of that. We can all sit in the current crises of today, and those of us who are invested in looking at these things can say, that sounds pretty idealistic in a country where we've got people tearing us apart because of all the bad things that we've done. Well, let me tell you something. With the bad comes the good. With the good comes the bad. We are a nation that has seen our flag fly over horrible things. Horrible things being done to us, horrible things we have done to others. We have seen our flag endure through people attempting to destroy us, to wipe us out, to annihilate us, and remove us and eradicate our history from the face of the earth. There are those that exist today that would cancel our culture, that would eliminate our heritage, that would erase our history in place of something that they believe is better in their point of view. But it is the people who live under this flag that will determine where this nation goes, what it does, the goodness that is here. You cannot have the good without the bad, so you keep evolving as a nation. You find ways to eliminate the bad that we do and replace it with the good that we do. Did you know I visited the Alamo for the first time 2 years ago? And I had put some pictures up on my social media, and some of you out there have seen those. And just remembering, because it was, 2 years ago, 2 days ago, that I visited there. And did you know in San Antonio, where the Alamo stands today, remember the Alamo, where freedom fighters, no matter what you believe the cause was, good or bad, where freedom fighters stood and defended that fort to the last man, where people in our history like Davy Crockett lost their lives. They were fighting against the armies of Mexico, of General Santa Anna, the leader of Mexico at the time, who committed heinous acts, killed many people. I don't know what the numbers are, but he was a tyrant. And I will tell you this, that there in San Antonio stands a statue of Santa Anna, because we honor who he was as a man, as a general, as a leader, as an honored opponent. And so, in this culture where we are canceling our own culture, remember that the flag of the United States stands proud and flies over everything we have done. And it is a symbol of who we are, a people that is free and a people that has the guaranteed constitutional right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we need to do everything
Looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with two T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad so he can take me to Disneyland.
All right, gang, welcome back to the show. This is Scotty Roberts, segment 2 of the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com to go see all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. At the same time, if you're only listening audibly, you can come over to my YouTube channel and see the simulcast video. And the best part is not necessarily just watching my face talking against this cool background that I have up, and all my logos of different places and advertisers and things like that. My little runner at the bottom where you can see all the websites that you can visit associated with this show. But it's also a place where you can join the live chat room, where everybody who is an Intrepid or calls themselves one is joining in to talk and chat during this show, comment on this show, and other things. Come on over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts, Mr. all spelled out, and join the fun over there. Let's get into what we've been talking about now for almost a month on this show, Native American history. We just ended talking about Dananagua, Eli, why is his name escaping me? Eli Parker, the first Native American Commissioner of Native American Affairs, of American Indian Affairs, appointed by President Grant. And we looked at his career. We looked at how the industrialists and the... and I'm not anti-industrialist. I'm only anti-industrialist when it serves itself rather than its nation. The betterment of its country. Now, they had a different perspective. Maybe they believed that they were serving the betterment of their country. We're going to leave that for history to judge and you to judge on your own. But all we know is that they lied about Dananagua and tried to remove him from office. He was exonerated of all charges of fraud and things like this, but he eventually resigned and went into private business and made a fortune as a Native American living in New York City. And so we saw his career, the rise and fall. We're going to get back into now some of the other tribes. We've been talking for a good 10 days about the Plains Indians. Maybe up to 2 weeks. We've been spending a lot of time on that. Let's go a little further south. We're going to look at Cochise. That's a name you've heard. Cochise and the Apache guerrillas. And it's now 1871. Let's look at a little history and show what's going on around the world in 1871. January 28th, Paris capitulates to the German army. March 18th, the Communist Uprising in Paris. This is 1871, Communist Uprising. May 10th, Franco-German Peace Treaty is signed. May 10th, Franco-German Peace Treaty signed. France cedes Alsace-Lorraine to Germany. May 28th, an uprising in Paris is suppressed. October 8th, the Great Chicago Fire. October 12th, President Grant issues proclamation against the Ku Klux Klan. November 10th, in Africa, Henry M. Stanley finds Dr. Livingstone. Dr. Livingstone, I presume. Impressionist painters hold the first exhibit in Paris. Darwin's Descent of Man is published. The next year, in 1872, March 1st, Yellowstone National Park is reserved for the people of the United States. James Fisk's and Jay Gould's corrupt Erie ring, Erie as in Lake Erie region, collapses. June of 1872, U.S. Congress abolishes federal income tax. They abolished the federal income tax. October, leading Republicans accused of receiving stock of Credit Mobilier in exchange for political influence to benefit Union Pacific Railroad. On November 5th of 1872, in Rochester, New York, Susan B. Anthony and other women's rights advocates arrested for attempting to vote. November 6th, President Grant is reelected. Now I want to read you a little quote from Cochise of the Chiricahua Apache. When I was young, I walked all over this country, east and west, and saw no other people than the Apache. After many summers, I walked again and found another race of people that had come to take it. How is it? Why is it that the Apache wait to die? That they carry their lives on their fingernails? They roam over the hills and plains and want the heavens to fall on them. The Apache were once a great nation. They are now but few. And because of this, they want to die, and so carry their lives on their fingernails. Excuse me. That was Cochise of the Chiricahua Apache. Delche of the Tonto Apache said, I don't want to run over the mountains anymore. I want to make a big treaty. I will keep my word until the stones melt. God made the white man and God made the Apache, and the Apache has just as much right to the country as the white man. I want to make a treaty that will last, so that both can travel over the country and have no trouble at all. And then a third quote for tonight. Eskimans of the Aravaipa Apache said, If it had not been for the massacre, there would have been a great many more people here now. But after that massacre, who could have stood it? When I made peace with Lieutenant Whitman, my heart was very big and happy. The people of Tucson and San Xavier must be crazy. They acted as though they had neither heads nor hearts. They must have had a thirst for blood. These Tucson people write for the papers and tell their own story. The Apache have no one to tell their story. Now, after the visit of Red Cloud, which we talked about yesterday, to Washington, D.C., in the summer of 1871, Commissioner Eli Parker and the other government officials discussed the advisability of inviting the great Apache chief Cochise to Washington, D.C. And although there'd been no military campaigns in the Apache country since the departure of Star Chief Carleton, if you remember him way back at the beginning of this series, after the Civil War, there were frequent encounters between roving bands of these Indians and the white settlers, miners, and freighters who kept intruding on the Apache homelands. The government set aside 4 reservations in New Mexico and Arizona for the various bands, but few Apache would come to live on any of them. They were worthless pieces of rocky dust hole. It was Commissioner Parker's hope, Eli Parker, Dananagua, that the Cochise could help bring about a permanent peace in the Apache country, and he asked his bureau's representatives in that area to invite the chief to come to Washington, D.C. Now, it wasn't until the spring of 1871 that any white man was able to find Cochise. And when at last communication was established, the chief declined the government's invitation. He said simply that he could not trust either the military or the civilian representatives of the United States. That is the reputation we had amongst Native Americans. He wasn't going to come in because he couldn't trust us. Cochise was a Chiricahua Apache. He was taller than most of his people. He was broad-shouldered. He was deep-chested. His face was intelligent. He had black eyes, a large straight nose, very high forehead, thick black hair. White men who met him said he was gentle in his manners. He was very neat and clean in his appearance. And when the Americans first came to Arizona, Cochise had welcomed them in 1856 during a meeting with Major Enoch Steen of the 1st U.S. Dragoons. Cochise promised, this is 1856 now, this is 15 years earlier. Cochise promised to let Americans cross the Chiricahua country on the southern route to California. He didn't object when the Butterfield Overland Mail established a stage station in Apache Pass. In fact, the Chiricahua living nearby cut wood for the station, trading it for supplies. Then one day in February of 1861, this is 10 years earlier, Cochise received a message from Apache Pass asking him to come into the station for a conference with a military officer. Expecting that this would be a routine matter, Cochise took along 5 members of his family, his brother, 2 nephews, a woman and a child. The military officer who wanted to see him was Lieutenant George N. Bascom of the 7th Infantry, and he'd been sent with a company of soldiers to recover cattle and a half-breed boy that was stolen from the ranch of John Ward. Ward had accused Cochise's Chiricahua of taking the cattle and the boy. As soon as Cochise and his relatives entered Bascom's tent, 12 soldiers surrounded the tent, and the lieutenant peremptorily demanded that the Chiricahua release the cattle and the boy. Cochise had heard about a captured boy, and a band of coyoteros from Gila had raided the Ward Ranch, he said, and probably were at Black Mountain. Cochise thought he might be able to arrange a ransom. Bascom's reply was that an accusation that the Chiricahua had the boy and cattle was what stood. And at first, Cochise thought that the young officer was joking. Bascom was short-tempered, however, and when Cochise made light of the accusation, the lieutenant ordered the arrest of Cochise and his relatives, declaring that he would hold them as hostages for the return of the cattle and the boy. At the moment the soldiers moved in to make the arrest, Cochise slashed a hole in the tent and fled under a volley of rifle fire. Although wounded, he managed to escape Bascom's pursuit, but his relatives were all there held as prisoners. To get them free, Cochise and his warriors captured 3 white men on the Butterfield. Now, you see the repeat of what has gone on all through the history of the taking of the American West. The whites do something stupid, or they commit atrocity, and the Native Americans who've been living, and this is a generalization, because there were bad Native Americans too, don't get me wrong, but overall the chiefs were living in peace and finding ways to say, look, we can share the country. Let's just live in peace. And things get done to them by the government, and they retaliate. So, to get them free, his family, Cochise and his warriors, captured 3 white men on the Butterfield Trail and tried to make an exchange with the lieutenant. Bascom refused the exchange unless the stolen cattle and the boy were included. Now, Cochise was infuriated by this because Bascom would not believe his people innocent, and so he blocked Apache Pass and besieged the infantry company at the stage station. After giving Bascom one more chance to exchange, Cochise executed his prisoners, the 3 white men. I'm done. I'm not fucking with you anymore, Cochise said. You've got my family. You won't exchange. You are lying about me. You will believe a lie. I'm done. And he executes the 3 whites that he had captured. He mutilated them with lances, a cruel practice the Apache had learned from the Spaniards. A few days later, Lieutenant Bascom retaliated by hanging Cochise's 3 male relatives that were still in his captivity. And it was at this point in history that the Chiricahua transferred their hatred of the Spaniards to the Americans. For a quarter of a century, they and other Apache would fight an intermittent guerrilla campaign that would be more costly in lives and treasure than any of the other Indian wars put together. Now, at this time, 1861, when this happened, the great war chief of the Apache was Mangus, Colorado, or Red Sleeves, a 70-year-old Membrano who was even taller than the towering Cochise. He had followers among many of the bands in southeastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. And Cochise was married to Mangus's daughter, and after the Bascom affair, the two men joined forces to drive the Americans from their homeland. They attacked wagon trains. They stopped the movement of stagecoaches and mails. They drove several hundred white miners out of their territory from the Chiricahua Mountains to the Mogolans. And after the Bluecoats and the Graycoats began the Civil War, Mangus and Cochise fought skirmishes with the Graycoats until they withdrew eastward. Then in 1862, now this is now 9 years before Cochise is given the invitation to come to Washington, D.C., Star Chief Carleton came marching from California with his thousands of Bluecoats, using the old trail ran through the heart of the Chiricahua country. And they came in small companies at first, always halting for water at a spring near an abandoned stage station in Apache Pass. And in the moon of the horse, July 15th, Mangus and Cochise deployed their 500 warriors along rocky heights overlooking the pass in spring. 3 companies of Bluecoat infantry, escorted by a troop of pony soldiers, had 2 wheeled vehicles that were approaching from the west. And when the column of 300 soldiers was strung out along the pass, the Apache attacked suddenly with bullets and arrows. And after returning fire for a few minutes, the soldiers hurriedly retreated from the pass. The Apaches didn't pursue them. They knew the Bluecoats would come back. And so after reforming, the infantrymen pushed into the pass again, this time with the 2 wagons rolling close behind them. The soldiers came within a few hundred yards of the springs, but there was no cover to shield them there, and the Apache had the water supply ringed in from above. For several minutes the Bluecoats held their position. Then the wagons came rolling up. Suddenly great flashes of fire burst from the wagons. Clouds of black smoke arose. A great thundering echoed through the air, and the Apaches had heard the little cannons of the Spaniards, but these big thundering wagon guns were filled with terror and death. Now the warriors retreated, and the Bluecoats moved up to take possession of the sweet-flowing waters of the springs. Mangus and Cochise were not yet ready to quit. If they could draw small bands of the soldiers away from the wagon guns, they might still defeat them. Next morning, they saw a platoon of pony soldiers riding back toward the west, probably to warn the other soldiers from coming that direction. Mangus took 50 mounted warriors and went dashing down to cut them off. In the running fight which followed, Mangus was wounded in the chest, falling unconscious from his horse. Dismayed by the loss of their leader, the warriors broke off the fight and carried Mangus's bleeding body back up to the heights. Now Cochise, he was determined to save Mangus's life. So instead of trusting to the medicine men and their chants and rattles, he placed his father-in-law in a sling and with an escort of warriors rode steadily southward for 100 miles into Mexico to the village of Llanos. A Mexican surgeon of great reputation lived there, and as he was presented with the helpless body of Mangus Colorado, he was given a terse ultimatum: make him well. If he dies, this town will die. Sounds like the stuff of movies, doesn't it? It's based on real life events. Some months later, Mangus was back in his Mimbre Mountains. He was wearing a broad-brimmed straw hat, a sarape, leather leggings, and Chinese sandals, and that he'd acquired in Mexico. He came back from Mexico with souvenirs. He was thinner and his face was more wrinkled than before, but he could still outride and outshoot warriors half a century younger than he was. While he was resting in the mountains, he heard that Star Chief Carleton had rounded up the mescaleros and imprisoned them at Bosque Redondo. Remember the Bosque Redondo? He learned that the Bluecoats were searching out Apache everywhere and killing them with their wagon guns, as they had killed 63 of his and Cochise's warriors at Apache Pass. Now, in the time of the flying ants, what a great way to keep a calendar. In the time of the flying ants, this is January of 1863, Mangus was camped on the Mimbre River, and for some time he'd been thinking of how he might obtain peace for all the Apache before he died. He remembered the treaty he had signed at Santa Fe in 1852, and in that year, the Apache and the people of the United States had agreed to this perpetual peace and friendship. Remember, all these treaties were written in perpetuity. And for a few years there had been peace and friendship, but now there was hostility and death. He wanted to see his people live in peace again. And he knew that even his bravest and most cunning young warriors, such as Victorio and a name that you're going to hear, Geronimo, could not defeat the great power of the United States. Perhaps it was time for another treaty with the Americans and their blue-coat soldiers who had become as numerous as the flying ants. One day a Mexican approached Mangus's camp under a truce flag. He said that some soldiers were nearby and wanted to talk of peace. To Mangus, their coming seemed providential because he'd been thinking about this. How can I go about this? And he could have preferred counseling with the Star Chief, but he agreed to go and to see the little Capitan, Edmund Sherland of the California Volunteers. Now, the Membranos warriors warned him, don't go. It's a trick. Don't go. And did he not remember what had happened to Cochise when he went to see the soldiers at Apache Pass? Mangus shrugged off their fears. After all, he was but an old man. What harm could the soldiers do to an old man who wanted only to talk of peace? You see any foreboding in that? He's just an old man who wants to talk about peace for his people. The warriors insisted that a guard accompany him. He chose 15 men, and they started up the trail toward the soldier camp. When they were within sight of the camp, Magnus and his party waited for the Capitan to show himself. A miner who spoke Spanish came out to escort Mangus into the camp, but the Apache guards would not let their chief go in until Captain Sherland mounted a truce flag. As soon as the white banner was raised, Mangus ordered his warriors to turn back. He would go in alone. He was protected by a truce and would be perfectly safe. Mangus rode on toward the soldier camp, but his warriors had scarcely disappeared from view when a dozen soldiers sprang from the underbrush behind him with rifles cocked and ready. Mangus was a prisoner of the white captain. "We hurried Mangus off to our camp at Fort McLean," said Daniel Connor, one of the miners who was traveling with the California Volunteers, "and we arrived in time to see General West come up with his command. The general walked out to where Mangus was in custody to see him, and looked like a pygmy beside the old chief," remember, who was very tall, and who also towered above everybody else around him in stature. He looked careworn and refused to talk, and evidently felt that he had made a great mistake in trusting the paleface on this occasion. Now, this was all a quote from this guy, Connor. And 2 soldiers were assigned to guard Mangus. And as night came on and the air turned bitter cold, they built a log fire to keep themselves and their prisoner from freezing. And one of the California Volunteers, Private Clark Stocking, afterward reported hearing General Joseph West's orders to the guards. "I want him dead or alive tomorrow morning. Do you understand? I want him dead." And this was a quote that was written about by James McClintock in Arizona, which was a book called Arizona, published in 1916. And because of the presence of Mangus's Apache in the area, extra sentinels were assigned to patrol the camp after darkness fell. Now, Daniel Connor was pressed into service, and he was walking his post just before midnight. He noticed that the soldiers guarding Mangus were annoying the old chief, so that he kept drawing his feet up restlessly under his blanket. Curious as to what the soldiers were doing, Connor stood just outside the firelight and watched them. They were heating their bayonets in the fire and touching them to Mangus's feet and legs. After the chief had endured this torture several times, he raised up and, quote, began to expostulate in a vigorous way by telling the sentinels in Spanish that he was no child to be playing with. But his expostulations were cut short, for he had hardly begun his exclamations when both sentinels promptly brought down their Minet muskets to bear on him and fired, nearly at the same time, through his body. End quote by Connor. Well, now, when Mangus fell back, the guards emptied their pistols into his body. A soldier took his scalp, another cut off his head and boiled the flesh away so that he could sell the skull to a phrenologist in the East. They dumped the headless body in a ditch. The official military report stated that Mangus was killed while attempting to escape. That's the official report. After that, as Daniel Connor put it, quote, "The Indians went to war in earnest. They seemed bent on avenging his death with all their power." End quote. Do you blame them? From the Chiricahua country of Arizona to the Mimbre Mountains of New Mexico, Cochise and his 300 warriors began a campaign to drive out the treacherous white men or sell their lives in the attempt. Victorio assembled another band, including mescaleros who had escaped from the Bosque Redondo, and they raided settlements and trails along the Rio Grande from Llorando del Muerto to El Paso. And for 2 years, these tiny armies of Apache kept the Southwest in turmoil. Most were armed only with bows and arrows, and their arrows were frail, 3-foot reeds, tri-feathered with triangular inch-long quartz-head tips, chipped to finest points, and they held to their shafts by jagged notches instead of thongs or wrappings. These missiles had to be handled with great care, but when the heads reached their marks, they embedded with the tearing force of many bullets. And with that the Apaches fought well with what they had, and they could see nothing, but they were outnumbered 100-1, and they could see nothing in the future but death or imprisonment. And that's where we've got to stop for tonight. In the middle of this, Cochise and the Apache Uprising. We're going to talk about this more on Monday when we come back. Thank you for being here tonight. Remember, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Western Time. Be right here for It's Sunday. It's my Sunday show. It's not officially on Odyssey Radio, so you can't hear it there. But you can come over to my YouTube channel, and we have open discussion with the chat room. I do tarot readings, and we talk about events and things. And a lot of good interaction. So thank you for being here tonight. You have a good night and a great weekend. I'll see you Sunday morning, and then again on Monday for more about Cochise and the Apache. Have a good night.